Yamaha cart lease, which we've actually presented to commission before, there would be additional dollars that we would have to negotiate with Yamaha to get out of that, because that's a 5-year lease, as we approved that with commission, if you recall. That was done through a commission meeting. So we would have to actually negotiate with Yamaha what the out would be if we enacted our 90-day out clause for the golf course. So if you look at now being 2 months or 2 years or so in theory, there would be 3 years remaining on the cart lease. Now, there's still value on those golf carts, which is a great thing. So we would be able to negotiate that with Yamaha to say, what's the current value? Would there be any payoff amount for us to get out of that cart lease 3 years early?
Again, I wish we had the numbers to compare this evening.
I understand.
With that complete thing, because this was discussed in August.
Yeah,
And if we had even pulled something, I know this RFP and stuff couldn't have been pulled together that quickly. But even if we had these numbers to look at and to judge, what would be the best for the city and the citizens of Aztec? I wish we had that instead of, as you're suggesting, pulling it from here and pulling it from there. And I honestly don't remember a 5-year lease with Yamaha, but that's on me. I thought maybe it was a yearly one, but that was an assumption, so that would be my fault. Especially when we have a 90-day out clause with the owners. Because if they wanted us out in 90 days, we would still be liable for a 5-year lease. I don't remember, did we do that right at the beginning?
Mayor, yes, one of the first things we had to do in order to get Yamaha to bring carts to us was to present the Yamaha lease to the commission and approve that. So maybe March of last year. I wouldn't know the date specific, but probably around that time.
Last year.
2 years ago.
2 years ago. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
I mean, my position is this, since we're not given a choice right here, I'd like to table everything till we have a choice.
I'm trying to remember from the workshop. I know we had quite a few discussions, but I guess I don't remember where we asked for how much it would cost.
Well, we didn't ask for that specifically, but we certainly discussed the option of the 90-day out.
Right, I know that, but I don't remember asking for the figures for that.
And I mean, we asked for then, would the owners work with us on reduced lease rates? Some of that is presented in this agreement, but yeah.
So are these negotiated rates from the owner only if we move forward with the contract that's in front of us tonight, or were they willing to do those?
No, that's negotiated rates, Mayor. Those are numbers that if the city re-ups our contract after the 2 years has been completed, then this would be moving forward on a 5-year plan. The ownership, their direction is they don't want to lose any of the revenues based on the $24,000 a year, so they would change the balance so that it's backloaded, so the first year and the last year would still work out to be $24,000 a year on average. So the number doesn't change on the average. It's just backloaded for payment.
Have they put that in writing?
No, ma'am.
Because then under fiscal input finance department / it says HVCC does not reduce the monthly lease beginning in February 2017. So that would have been an option that they don't reduce it.
Yes, ma'am. So based on the finance department input there, that's if those things don't change. So we clearly defined if these things remain in place, then this is what, if then, is how that's presented. So if we don't do any type of change with Hidden Valley, then this is the financial impact.
I found, and I did read through this whole, I'm not sure if it's a contract. Larry, did you have part in putting this together?
No. It was sent to me on the 9th for review, and to be perfectly honest, I haven't gotten back with a written review of the contract yet. But that's, as you say, that's on me, because I had to have a certain procedure today, so
I just don't see how we can vote on this.
no, I haven't.
Because we haven't run it past our lawyer. He hasn't had a chance, and he did have a medical thing going. there's a bunch of things in this, and this is why I questioned it, Mr. Thrower, was, I mean, I found some very vague language in this thing back and forth, and I'm like, there's just no way that a lawyer looked at this. There's a few questions that I think you could answer, and beginning in August, Mr. Ray, you were going to ask Mr. Thrower if we could even do a sublet, if it was allowed. We still don't have an answer to that question.
We can sublet it.
Yeah, I have opined on that, I have not done a written opinion on it.
Okay.
We can sublet.
And yet, this isn't really a sublet, this is an operations agreement, which is a little different. I mean, it might be slight, but it's totally different from the RFP that went out. And I'm wondering if this were presented to the other two that did not ultimately respond, if this type was in the RFP, would they have responded? Because this doesn't, I mean, parts of it are the same, but when I'm looking at the numbers, let's say year number 1, 2, 2, and 4, 4, I'm assuming that's 1, 2, 3, and 4. By year 1, 36,000, that would be starting in February, but that doesn't include the 50,000 that you want transferred over. That's left in the fund, the transfer in fund, which you mentioned earlier. So actually it would be $50,000 more year 1, which would take it low ball if the golf course owners decide to go down to just $1,000 a month instead of $2, would be $86,000 for the first year going towards this contract. And then also all of the equipment, all of the lawn equipment, all of the office equipment. And I just don't see how this doesn't come under the gifting. Honestly, I really don't. I mean, at the very end, there's all these caveats in here. And I don't even know if I should go through them now. I did make notes on everything. It said the city of Aztec will provide no compensation to Rubies in the Valley. How is this not compensation? When you're taking everything that the city owns there at the golf course, you're turning it over, plus giving them the lease money for the property and the golf carts, and the 50,000 that we had budgeted for. 50, it was 80. We've used 30. 50 hasn't been used, so that wants to be pulled. How is this not compensation? Maybe I should direct this to Larry.
Well, I mean, I have opined that it doesn't violate the anti-donation clause because the city is receiving a quid pro quo. That is, the city is receiving the continued availability of the municipal golf course. We're receiving something for something. And the terms of the agreement are such that the city is still putting money into the golf course, but we receive the consideration of the continued operation of a municipal golf course.
But we don't get any of the tax dollars from that because it's outside the city limits.
But, yeah, I have opined it does not violate the anti-donation clause.
Okay.
Mayor, and one of
Have
those,
you opined that it is or not compensation?
I haven't looked at that specific issue. The agreement perhaps could be more artfully drafted in terms of whether or not it's compensation. But once again, I haven't reviewed the entire contract at this point.
Okay.
Madam Mayor?
I did get it on the 9th for review, but I have not completed a review.
So the way I was understanding it was we wouldn't be paying the contractor those funds. We would pay Hidden Valley, and then we would pay the cart company. So the funds would not be paid to Mr. Hodge, correct? Is that
Correct.
how it wouldn't be compensation? I mean,
But if you
Yeah,
took
there's no
over a
cash,
business,
right.
if you took over a business, those would be part of your business costs. And when we first talked about this in August, it was subletting. Someone taking over the business. Not someone just being a manager of the business, someone taking over the business. And that's what we talked about in August.
well, they are, except for the lease to Hidden Valley and the cart fee. Those are the two things that we would.
Well, if that were
But there
true,
is a
then
difference. If you're truly just having an outside entity come in, then generally they're gonna be responsible for all of those things.
Okay.
This agreement is definitely a little different. I have concerns too, and I would have liked to have seen a few other, just to had some information along, like we requested at the workshop to see. It's a frustrating situation when we don't get that, and we have folks coming to us from the community asking, what's going on, where is this? And so that, yeah, I'm frustrated with that as well. So,
I think, Madam Mayor, if I may, there's so many holes in this agreement that we couldn't possibly do anything with this tonight, especially until our lawyer looks at it. And I have a list probably of about 15 or 20 things in here that I need clarification on before I could vote for anything.
So here's my question, Mr. Ray. Is this something that, with some of the additional information and requested numbers, that could be pulled together in a reasonable time frame?
If you, Mayor, if you tell me exactly what commission would like, then we can do that. What we would need to do with Yamaha is tell them a if clause, if we end this contract now, which Yamaha has not been in the business of doing that.
Right.
We've had the discussion. I feel like commission's assuming we haven't had that discussion, so let's make that very clear. We've had that discussion with Yamaha that as long as we're in the contract and we don't have an out date, then there's no way to negotiate that number. However, we will push Yamaha to tell us if we're out within 90 days, what's the
buyout of
what
the
is the
contract?
what is the impact, financial impact to the city, if there's any impact to it. Other than that, I'm not sure what additional numbers we're requesting.
Well, I guess on that end, if you were closing, it wouldn't just be Yamaha. There would be some kind of cost for the next 3 months, let's say if you got out.
Staffing.
So we would need those numbers. We would.
Right, and Mayor, those numbers are
Right,
in
those
here.
are in here.
If we're looking at the 2015, those numbers are presented. The only way, as we said before, we said we didn't want to discuss what ifs. I think that was your comment, Commissioner McClure, in the workshop, is you can't project these numbers because my numbers are so off. Why would I project any more numbers? So if we look directly at the finance department's numbers, they're right here presented to you. Those are the only numbers we have. So that one's already presented clearly for the number. That's my only question, is I want to make sure that we present exactly what we're looking at. The reason for bringing this to commission now was so that we could have that dialogue to see directionally where we're looking at going. If we're looking at 90 days and out, then let's take the vote 90 days and out so we can go ahead and transition. Per our lease agreement, we either make it to the end of the contract, the 2-year agreement, or we have the 90-day out clause, which at this point,
About the same.
when our lease agreement's up, would be the end. And so all we would need to do is plan for, we have to keep it open during that time
We do?
and manageable. We have to operate the course
Okay.
For the
during that
90
time,
days.
for that
So,
period.
I mean, at the most, then it would be $24,000 a year to Yamaha. Maybe not a buyout thing like a cell phone. You know, when you decide to change your contract there, usually at some kind of rate.
At the worst
So
case
let's
scenario.
say 24,000 a year for 3 more
For
years.
3 years.
That's less than we lost in the first one.
72,000. But again, that being the worst case scenario, I believe you're right, Commissioner McClure, on that line item. And then if we look at 3 more months of operations, looking at generating 0 revenues, in theory, looking here, then we'd say, well, even with the loss from last year, 15 to 16, that shows 24, 25, 26, 27,000. So if that's to get us to the end of the contract, and that's.
And then another question would be for Kathy Lamb. So at the end of December, at the end of that quarter, are you going to say, oh my gosh, we need this money in the golf course because we have to balance the books? We'd have to factor in that money. Okay. So it would be the golf cart lease and the operational costs for the next 3 months, possibly, well, we don't know with Yamaha because we haven't contacted them.
We have contacted them, Mayor. We don't have the
details.
world of what if. That's what, we don't have a fixed.
Right, that's what I mean.
But they have been contacted.
Correct, yes, ma'am.
Any chance some of the other golf courses would be interested in taking over that lease or anything?
Potentially, and that's what I'm saying, there could be enough value in those carts because they're in good condition. I think we only have one golf cart completely that hasn't had a whole lot of value that they're working on now, but they all have plenty of value. Therefore, that's why I say that the number, as we
Could
said,
be
the max
reduced.
could be 72, and it could be 0, based on the value of the carts. They've been well maintained, and so that's a plus.
So when, in the staff summary, when we talk about requiring, that additional 50,000 of what was budgeted to complete the fiscal year, so that is based on, I'm not sure the way it's worded here, if we make this change, if we don't make this change, what is that based on?
It's if we make this change
Mm-hmm.
and the city would continue and responsible for the lease of the facility.
And the golf carts.
Lease of the carts, and then the loss that we have to date, and doing some rough estimates.
So it would require that additional 50,000 to cover that through the fiscal year.
Correct.
So that's if we go with this now.
And that's a, again, that's assuming, that there's no change in the facilities.
Right, no change, so that would be some savings there. But the concern is the way it's going, we would be probably eating up more than that 50,000 if we continue as is.
Absolutely.
Correct, potentially, yes.
Right.
Well, another caveat that was in here that I would find very difficult to say anything again was under the fiscal input finance department, line number 4. November 2016 does not incur any unexpected costs. What if all the mowers go down? You know, there is, that's the problem I have with this whole document. There's things like that all the way through it. And even though it talks near the end of what Ruby's would do as far as the liquor license, there's nothing attached to that money-wise. It just says will be invoiced. There's another part in it later on where it says, I don't understand why, well, again, this is a management contract. This isn't what we originally had talked about. But the changes, some of the changes under number 12C, they include an increase or decrease in compensation, and it says it right there, compensation. Again, that is just so vague. So as not to know. What I would like to know is best case scenario and worst case scenario a lot of the time. So worst case scenario, our 2 big mowers fail, or 3, however many are out there. What would that cost be? Why is this even in here for November? Because it's only 2 more weeks. And the Hidden Valley has not really said they'll reduce the rate because nothing's in writing.
Mayor, clarify a couple of those comments too. The reason that we've presented an operating agreement for management, so to allow a firm, someone to operate the golf courses, because that is how the industry is operating. And when I say the industry in general, that does make a very vague statement, but a number of golf courses in the state of New Mexico, because we're trying to focus only on how state of New Mexico is operating. The city of Roswell has 2 golf courses where they operate with a management firm. City of Hobbs has a golf course that they operate with a management firm, and they operate with management agreements and not subleases. So when talking with these golf courses who have done something similar, that have taken a privatized golf course and turned it into a municipal golf course, that's the plan that they utilize. That's the type of agreement that they've used. So we didn't just go out and say, hey, I think we'll just arbitrarily create a management agreement and then see if that works. What we did is we talked to these others, looked at their transformation, and that's where they've come about to say it does work more financially. It's more financially suitable to operate with this management agreement than to simply sublet it. But
Again, if this had, and I had addressed this in a couple of emails, if commission had gotten this at this final stage, before we even brought it before commission, and this had gone out as the RFP, I think you would have gotten more responses. But then you would have had to have agreement from commission first that this was something that we would be willing to do. But the original RFP had all of this stuff in it on what the city would do and what the management would do, without the caveat of us paying for the lease and paying for the golf carts and turning everything over. And using the liquor license was in the original RFP. And I just wonder if all of this were in here, would you not have gotten more responses?
And in response to that, two options here. So originally, when we said the RFP, we thought there would be a flat expense that the city would pay. We had this conversation in the workshop. Would that be $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 that the city would pay annually as an acceptable rate to the contractor, to the management firm to operate the course? That was our dialogue, if you recall, from the workshop. That could be an option. In our negotiation back for this draft, it came about that, well, wouldn't it be easier for the city, since you can't transfer that Yamaha lease, to pay this in lieu of a direct compensation to the management firm?
So
And
it's
so-
the equivalent of a $48,000 a year, basically payment to operate the golf course.
Yes, ma'am. And so on the dialogue with the other two contractors that operate golf courses in New Mexico, the location being in the northwest corner of New Mexico and being quite some distance from the other golf courses made it difficult for them to be able to prepare proposals for golf course operations. And we contacted some of the courses in Durango, and those are privatized and don't have firms, and they just weren't interested in getting into that management industry outside of their state. So that's some of the restrictions.
So the response to the original RFP, there was only one, or there were three?
No, there was only one proposal received. And we had dialogue with two others.
And so the dialogue with the two others was not productive, or?
Well, just like with all of our others, like road projects, they're very productive. They call and ask questions. They say, hey, what are the parameters of what you're looking for? How can this work? What are the numbers? But it doesn't mean they're going to turn in a proposal. This happens all the time, where people call in and ask these questions, and you think they're on the cusp of preparing a proposal.
So you did have dialogue with them, they just
Mhm.
elected not to then submit a proposal?
Correct.
At the end of year 5, so the city would be paying at minimum $60,000 a year for the
So-
golf course.
No, it wouldn't work out that way, because the golf cart lease, as we just talked about a few minutes ago, only goes for 3 more years. So then the city would be out of that Yamaha lease after 3 years.
But in your numbers right here,
Yeah, so if we kept it that way moving forward for the whole 5 years of an agreement, then that's how it would work out. What Mr. Hodge requests is a 3-year agreement with the city. And so just showing those projections for the Yamaha lease would say for 5 years. However, the city only has that lease for 3 more years. So if you say at the end of year 3, then the city would pay $24,000 plus $24,000 after year 3, then that would be 48. For year 4 and year 5, we would need a new agreement with a contractor, with a management firm moving forward.
Right. to
So
cover
year
the
4 and
golf
year
carts.
5, we don't have a Yamaha agreement at that point. We don't have a cart lease at that point. So we
do
don't
we
have any
own them at
expenses.
the end of 3 years?
No.
No, ma'am. So there's a balloon payment on those that allow you to buy it out
How much is that?
to re-up the lease. I don't know the number right offhand, which is part of that negotiation of what we do with it.
I'd like to table this, Mayor. There's just no way we could go forward without all this information down and having our lawyer look at this.
Been trying to jump in here a couple times, but anyway, I would feel more comfortable if Mr. Thrower had looked at this and to do anything, so I don't have a problem tabling it. I just, and I did ask Josh about this today, and I would also feel more comfortable if, since we are carrying the lease on the golf carts, if we got the revenue back from leasing them or renting them to try to offset some of that cost, you know, because we're not getting any revenue back from them. So, I mean, that was just one thing I wanted to look at. And then the other thing that I would like to see is something that we have talked about over and over again is going ahead with that annexation, because I still think it's a valuable asset to the community, but to annex that into Aztec, you know, because it is. And I just have to say that I continually hear from lots of people who want to see it remain open. But those are the two things about the golf cart revenues, but I really would like to see to have Mr. Thrower given a written opinion on the agreement.
Madam Mayor?
Yes.
I also agree. I have no problem tabling it. I think if we're going to give direction to the city manager, though, I think we need to be a little more specific about what exact figures we're looking for. I mean, I just think it's kind of hard to
I'm not
to
in
allow for.
disagreement.
Yeah, no,
I
no.
just-
I think it's kind of hard to allow for unexpected expenses because you really never know what those are for the month of November. But other than that, I think getting more
Well,
specific
I mean,
figures.
part of it is I could look back at the work plan or the business plan for this that was presented and then represented at the beginning of last year, where it was projected after new numbers, because the first business plan, I in particular felt that the numbers were just way off. So city manager came up with a second work plan where he projected in the first year, which was actually the second year of operation, that the golf course would have only lost $3,000 within that first year. And that's part of the problem with projections, because it's way off. Obviously, if someone wants to totally take over the golf course and try it on their own and think they can win at it, great. I'm not sure. In fact, I know the city shouldn't be involved with it right now, in my opinion, because golf courses all over everywhere are down and failing. And there's no reason to believe that ours would not be any different. That would not be as big a problem if the state of the finances in the state of New Mexico weren't as bad as they are right now. Gross receipts tax continue to fall even after we revised our budget, factoring in for that, and then they fell again. And it looks like they're going to continue to fall, which has affected, obviously, Bloomfield with 6 to 8 layoffs, City of Farmington now with $1.5 million in the red in just the first 3 months of the fiscal year. Everybody is affected. We're not immune to it. Would I love Aztec to have a golf course? Of course. But at the cost of all the taxpayers and the tax money that we're putting into this, over $100,000 a year, we cannot sustain that. And even if the management, let's say, because in this new, I guess, what are we calling it, operations agreement, there again is a 90-day out clause for both sides. I mean, on our side, it would have to be gross negligence, and I don't think that would happen, but Randy would certainly have that option also. And then we'll be back here.
Okay. So at this time, I would like to make a motion that we table a vote on this topic. And so before I complete that motion, apparently we need to discuss when that might take place in order for me to be able to complete it. And then before we close it, also, after a second, we'll discuss specifics, specific information.
Let me clarify where we're at, and this maybe help with our planning if it is tabled, Mayor. So the question had come from a commission, hey, where are we at? So we've received this question of, what are we doing moving forward? Well, we've provided the financial dollars. I believe Kathy sent those out as requested. That information's been presented. The conversations, the dialogue for what are those options. So we did present the RFP. We brought in someone, went through that RFP process as we do with every proposal that we're looking for. And in an effort to get this to the commission for review and for discussion, because that's what's been requested, I know Commissioner McClure said it over again, hey, why are we not reviewing this? We wanted to present this now. I believe the mayor leaves out tomorrow morning out of town. So trying to get this in front of commission so that there's some dialogue instead of no dialogue was the goal. So our whole presentation is we get it to here to see if there's any desire or to say, we're gonna make it to the end of the 2-year and then we're closing up shop. That's the functionality of presenting this to commission at this time, because we did have an agreement to present. So, Mayor, with that, I can make the phone call first thing tomorrow. I can't guarantee that I'll get a response back from our contact, but I can guarantee that I'll get a response back by Wednesday from Yamaha.
Okay, so could we look at tabling it until the next regular commission meeting on the 22nd?
I will not be on the 22nd, so you can, but every time I seem to leave, it seems to be questions directed back towards me that no one else can answer if they're directed at me directly. I know that's the last 2 meetings that have been Josh Ray specific questions, and if I'm not here,
Okay.
I can't physically answer that. And Kathy or Steve or anybody else can't
So
speak
I'm
for me.
assuming then you'll be gone the rest of that week, then being
Yes, ma'am.
Thanksgiving. What about the following week?
I am in town through May.
Yeah, okay, sure. Commission members then, that following the last week of November, first week of December?
I would suggest we have this on a regular commission meeting. I don't even know at this point why we had it tonight instead of next week, except for Mr. Ray, I guess, is not going to be here.
Right. So if that's the
You know,
case,
I'd
then-
rather,
And that's a Thursday.
in my opinion, I would rather just ditch it, to be honest. I mean, in the first year, I'm going to remind all the commissioners, and even Commissioner Randall, I think at the community thing, you were, when we were doing, before you became commissioner, you were against putting any more money into it. All of us commissioners that are left up here said, after the first year, if it hasn't made money, we're ditching it. Josh Ray said the same thing. And then after the year came up, it was, well, we really didn't get enough time. You can't do it in a year. Let's give it another year. So here we are, almost at the end of the other year, and if we continue doing it and, let's say, don't outsource it, it'll be another, Kathy, $50,000 to $100,000
Okay,
in the red. So, I mean, why are we continuing when we already said we wouldn't in the past?
I'm making a motion to table this discussion until the December 13th commission then.
I'll second that.
Okay. Are there any specific details of information that we'd want the city manager to provide at that time?
Yes, ma'am. I would like to have, like it is all here with all the numbers and everything, all of those numbers instead of in this. Mr. Ray didn't come out until I asked Kathy for it this morning. But I would like to see that all concise also as a plan A, a plan B. So let's say this one is plan A after Larry has looked at it. Plan B would be if we close it, worst case scenario, what those numbers would be if we're going by these, which are revenues and expenditures since we opened. I'd like to find out from Yamaha, because you say we have a 5-year lease, but we don't know if we turn it in early, what that penalty will
And
be,
that's
if
part of Plan
anything.
B.
Right, that would be part of Plan B. So let's say we say we're just going to close it.
Okay.
We have to stay open for 90 days. Here are the figures, all on one, just like is presented here.
So you're just looking for Plan A and Plan B?
This is Plan A. Yeah, I'd like Plan
Right,
B.
so no additional plans?
I can't think of another one besides, I mean, either keeping it open. No, there is the third one, if the city continues to run it.
Any other requests of information from commissioners?
No, ma'am.
No? Okay, so we have a motion on the table we have a motion before us to table this item until the December 13th commission meeting with the specific Plan A and Plan B documentation provided at that time, and Plan C apparently keeping it open. So projections far out for that. Is
And
there
I
a second?
second. Yeah, I did, yeah.
Okay, my apologies. So we
That's
have a
all right.
motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Okay.
All right, and I will attempt, Madam Mayor, I will attempt to get the contract reviewed in detail and a written opinion on the proposed operating agreement within the next week and a half, 2 weeks.
Okay, thank you. All right, then I would entertain a motion for adjournment.
Please.
Move to adjourn.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.